Hello and welcome to Insights by 180 Degrees Consulting, Manipal University, Jaipur. This is a webinar where experts on their subjects provide their valuable insights on the ongoing situation of pandemic COVID-19. Today we have Ms. Aishwarya Bhati, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India. I would like Mamtati to introduce the guest to the viewers.
Hello everyone. Ms. Aishwarya Bhati Ma'am, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, is the youngest female designated advocate in the Supreme Court of India and also the first female advocate from Rajasthan who have been given this coveted stature at the Supreme Court. She is also Additional Advocate General for the state of UP in Supreme Court. Ma'am has been elected twice as Honorary Secretary of Supreme Court Bar Association in the year 2013-14. She had argued numerous cases of national importance in 20-year vast career, which include the landmark case of grant of permanent commission to women officers in Indian Army and Navy, validity of Aadhaar, constitutional validity of Muslim religious practices, of Muslim personal law, and many more. Ma'am, it's our utmost pleasure to have you on board. We thank you for joining us today. We welcome you to the Insight by 180 DC MUJ.
Thank you.
Now, ma'am, the first question is from me only. Ma'am, as we all know, you were involved in the landmark judgment of Right to Privacy 1, case Puttaswamy judgment. So we wanted to ask you regarding the privacy of the COVID-19 patient. How do you think that the steps of like releasing the data or releasing the personal details of the COVID-19 patient is against the right to privacy or not? What are your views on that, ma'am?
Well, firstly, let me thank you, Mamta, for inviting me on this panel with engineers. Now that you've told me they're all engineering students, I'm a little scared. Anyways, let me not get my scare the better of me. You know, is it a violation of privacy? Most certainly it is. It is a violation of privacy when you want to do contact tracing of COVID positive patients, when you want to find out who all they have been in touch with, where all they have gone. Because the manner in which the Constitution permits freedom to us to roam around anywhere, to pursue anywhere in the territory of the country, to pursue a livelihood litigation profession of our livelihood profession of our choice, is guaranteed as a fundamental right under Article 19 of the Constitution. Privacy is not really specifically defined in any of the Part 3 articles, but you were right in pointing out that the Supreme Court in that the famous privacy judgment of Puttaswamy has recognized privacy as an inherent fundamental right which already exists in the trinity rights of the equality, liberty, and life. So that being the position of privacy having been exalted and recognized as such as a basic fundamental right, when we are accepting that this is a violation of privacy, then does this really amount to violation of our fundamental right of privacy also? That is the question that we need to find an answer to. And for that, I will draw your attention not just to the freedoms which are prescribed in, sub-article 1 of Article 19. We sometimes have a tendency of glossing over the rest of the sub-articles, namely sub-article 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which actually themselves prescribe reasonable restrictions which can be imposed. Let me tell you, for example, for the purpose of moving freely throughout the territory of India, which is guaranteed under 19(1)(d), it is subject to any reasonable law that can be made, and it is qualified by sub-article 5, which is on the ground of general public, interest of the general public for the protection and interest of the scheduled tribe, and for and in addition to that, the clauses which are with regard to public order, decency, morality, etc. So these are restrictions which are themselves prescribed in the Constitution, and even otherwise, you know, I have been reading about some books from Nani Palkhiwala, and let me quote him, because yours and my saying is something else, but Palkhiwala is a legal luminary that an entire generation, in fact, many generation of lawyers look up to. He was the lawyer who argued some of the strongest liberty cases for for the citizens, and he played a formidable role even in the fundamental rights case of Keshwanand Bharti. He says that no virtue is absolute, not even a freedom. It is true that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, but it is true in a deeper sense that eternal responsibility is also part of the price of liberty. Excessive authority without liberty is intolerable, but excessive liberty without authority and without responsibility soon becomes equally intolerable. He goes on to say that liberty has a hypnotizing sound, while unfortunately, responsibility has no sex appeal. Freedom is like alcohol. It has to be enjoyed in moderation. The current Chief Justice of India in one of his lectures said that the Constitution permits me the right to move my hand freely in whatever manner I want. But the person sitting next to me, his right to move his hand ends where my nose begins. He can't be moving his hand in a manner so as to hit my nose and say, well, the Indian Constitution allows me the right to move my hand freely and I can do that anywhere. No, the rights don't exist in isolation. They don't exist in vacuum. If one person has, and these are, we often understand fundamental rights as they are rights available just against the state. They are also available against a community of people. And if there is a clash between individual rights and the common good of general good of the community of people, then it has to be sacrificed at that altar. Now, I think COVID is the perfect example that God has given us. Unfortunately, a bad one, but a perfect example to understand that how we can't be pursuing our fundamental rights in such an absolute term so as to completely jeopardize, so as to completely devastate the health and well-being and safety of the rest of the people around us. So privacy violation, yes, but not violation of right to privacy, because these are reasonable restrictions which are necessitated by the COVID-19 situation.
Ma'am, the second question that we'd like to ask is, what are your views on digitalization of court procedure? And do you think that the court should proceed the online hearing post-COVID-19 lockdown?
So, Vinay, now we have had some experience of appearing before virtual courts. We have been in this lockdown for a long enough period and have experienced some hearings on regular hearings. In fact, the Supreme Court is hearing even larger. Since Monday, we have not just urgent cases, but we have all short causes matters. We have fresh matters that have come up for hearing. Enlargement of jurisdiction has happened. It is an interesting experience. It does not substitute or compare with the real life experience. There are several glitches, which glitches go with technology. There are a lot of shortcomings. There are a lot of problems and issues. More so because we are doing this for the first time. It's not so much just about technology, but it is also because we are doing this for the first time. And whenever we change processes, we see in our personal lives, also in our, academic or professional lives, whenever you're trying something new, you're bound to run into some uncatered for situations, etc. Let me also tell you one more thing. For the last 2 decades, there is a process of e-filing that has been going on in Supreme Court of India. 2 decades, 20 years, it's probably as much as your age. And we did not still make it a reality. We were still toying with that idea. COVID gave us a push to technology. I'm telling you about Supreme Court of India. Delhi High Court and some other high courts do use virtual courtrooms. They have been using for a long time. But even in those virtual courtrooms, it is not like lawyers are not there in the courtrooms. The lawyers, the clients are all there, and the judges are reading their files on their systems instead of having the paper briefs with them. But this has given a completely new dimension. There is a control room that is available. Everybody who has matters there waits in the control room while proceedings go on one by one. You have access to the microphone and video only when your case is called out. Despite grave shortcomings and initial teething troubles, there are significant advantages also. those significant advantages are the advantages that we must carry with us when we go in the post-COVID normal era. You know, there is a post-COVID, I mean, this is not really post-COVID. I mean, we continue to live in, these are COVID times. So this is normal new, but we will go back to a life as it was. I'm certain we will, once our scientists, you know, the world over are in a race to have a vaccine. I'm sure they'll succeed sooner than later. What will be important is that sometimes a serious, you know, challenge throws an opportunity at you, and you change. And there are a lot of bad things in that change that you don't carry with you when you go on, but there are a lot of good things which can actually, I think, which can become a pill for many ills that are there in our system. You know, you know what we get mocked at the most? Despite having one of the best and most respected judiciary in the world, we have our judges and our judiciary, our judicial pronouncements are some of the most respected authoritative pronouncements in judiciaries across the world. But despite that, we get mocked because they say the closest thing to a definition of infinity is a civil suit in Indian courts. And we also get mocked that, you know, in India is a dubious distinction of passing on matters through the generations in their testaments. Your wills will have, oh, so-and-so property subject to so-and-so litigation that has been pending for some 50 years and it's going to likely to go on. It's dubious. And our criminal trials, we had under trials languishing in our jails, who without trial had undergone that much sentence that even if they would have been convicted, they would have been let off far before. These are very serious issues that our systems have continued to grapple with. Of course, we are a developing country. We have our own set of infrastructure, resource, and crunch. But technology can be a force multiplier, and we must certainly use technology as a force multiplier. In fact, that is the signal we get from the head of the judiciary, also the Chief Justice of India, when we had that launch of the new system. He said that the way forward is going to be a mix of both. And that is how I would love it to be.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question will ask Sai Santosh.
Ma'am, what are your views on a few states exempting companies from labor laws for 3 years?
Well, this is a very, this is not a question that can be answered in clear white or black terms. But let me share with you some of the things that I have gathered. So of course, clearly it is in violation of the international labor laws and the labor norms that India is a signatory to. It violates indirectly, it violates some of the constitutional guarantees also. However, like I was mentioning, that ordinary times have ordinary solutions. Extraordinary times you cannot make do with ordinary solutions. Let me explain. I don't run any industry. I have no first-hand knowledge, but I have some friends who do, and I asked them how these labor law amendments are going to, because they were elated about it. They were jubilant about it, about these changes. So I asked them, how is it going to change? They said this is going to make so much of a difference because we have to learn to live with COVID, which means we have to practice social distancing, which means we can't have all our hands on the floor for working at the same time, which means we need to have periodic breaks for sanitizing the premises and the equipment at regular intervals, which means a whole lot of other things which were not existing earlier. But if we can't have all our workers on floor at the same time, then we need to have the latitude, the liberty to have different shifts, and not having to pay overtime or allowing people to stay on board, or they are going through difficult times economically, so not be required to pay overtime, etc. That's what I gathered from some of my friends who are running industries. I'm not sure the challenge has already been laid to some of these laws in the court of law. But let's also look at the politics of it. Sometimes the politics of things also says a lot. Though we are, neither am I a student of politics, and none of are you. But still, something tells you that when state governments across party lines have done this, it's not just one kind of political affiliation. It is different kind of political ideologies in different states have done it. Uh, then there is something more than just it's clearly the intention is not to oppress the labor in any way, and this is not an amendment for all times to come. This is an amendment which is a short time period. Let's see how it goes. I'm not sure how the legality will be decided, but those are some of the things that I have gathered, which I've shared with you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now we are moving to next question.
Yes. So, ma'am, what are your views on prisoners being released or sent home during COVID-19 situation to empty the cells?
So, Abhineet, that is also one of the extraordinary situations and extraordinary measures that have been appointed by countries across the world. It's not just in our country that such measures have been taken. We all know how prison cells are. Even in normal times, it is not possible for everyone to have social distancing. Our jails, which are already overcrowded, they are running on more than what their capacity is. So several measures have been taken by our states, also our state governments. Prisons are essentially under the state governments, so the state governments have taken these decisions, and the judiciary also, I must tell you, they have been marching on with the state governments on this. And the distinction that they have made is the crimes which are less heinous, which are punishable by a less grave sentence, and which are not offenses of grave depravity. They have taken a considered stand to release those kind of prisoners. Of course, a balance has to be drawn. We can't be letting out all hardened kind of criminals also, and heinous offenses criminals also in the society, because that will, in difficult times, that will endanger us in a different way. The citizens will be endangered in a different way. So it is a fine line that has to be drawn. And the situation has changed by the hour. We have seen the COVID period. There hasn't been one solution that has been a solution for the entire period. The paradigm has shifted, policies have shifted, the best practices have shifted, and we have seen that shift rightly in the government decisions and government policy also world over. I think India as a country, I feel as a citizen, India has done well to, initially the doctors felt that they were fighting an invisible enemy. Today, our doctors are a little well equipped. I mean, a little slightly more. They understand at least the enemy. So, it's a very dynamic situation, and a dynamic situation requires dynamic answers. This is a completely unheard of time. Nobody could have ever imagined in 6 months back, if somebody would have floated an idea like this, he would have been laughed at, he would have been booed at, and they would have dismissed him as completely sarfara. But then we're living in such times that we could not imagine, even in the wildest of our dreams. So let's see.
That's true. Well said, ma'am. So Praneeth shall be asking the another question.
So ma'am, for the past two questions, we've seen that extraordinary times require extraordinary measures. I would like to relate my question to it. What are your views on updating the laws which were made in late 1800s to the time in the current 21st century?
So my opinion is that there is no standard formula or a standard size fit all formula that applies. Every time I pick up the Indian Penal Code, which I have done again, for your information, I did it again because I have my sons are law students, so I was using this time to also teach them a little. And Indian Penal Code was made in the English system by Lord Macaulay in the 1860. it is my firm opinion, which has got reiterated again, that when I was teaching my children, that IPC continues to be one of the best legislations that has been written, and there is very little change. And in fact, if we were to redo it now, we will probably come out short. The kind of illustrations that are there, the kind of provisos that are there, the kind of examples which are there in the statute book, it is incredible. And a crime, you know, you're all engineers, so you understand how a building has to be made without any loopholes. You know, a criminal law has to be made idiot proof, so that nobody can find loopholes out of it, so that nobody can slip into the gaps. You know, our criminal jurisprudence is an adversarial system. We believe that 10 guilty person may go scot-free, but one innocent should not be convicted. And because of that, we have a system of crime to be established beyond the shadow of all reasonable doubt. But when we have that system, it is equally important that the law applies with the surety and certainty, without any scope of interpretation, especially for criminal laws. So I wouldn't say there is one formula for all laws. There are lots of laws that have become redundant. We saw some really hilarious laws which were in existence when this government actually, in the last term of this government, that was something that was propagated a lot, that this government has scrapped a lot of obsolete laws, and we did not even realize those kind of laws were existing. But well, we have to see law has to be dynamic. It cannot stay stagnant, because life is dynamic. If we saw that adultery got challenged in Supreme Court in the 70s and got affirmed as a crime in the IPC, and the definition of adultery is so offensive that it says that if you are having physical relations with a woman without the consent or connivance of her husband. So if you have sexual relations with the woman with the consent and connivance of her husband, then it is not an offense. If you don't take his consent or connivance, and this was affirmed by Supreme Court of India also. But just 2 years back, they threw it out. Interestingly, it was the son of the same judge, son of the same judge who was the author of the previous judgment, and the son was the author this time. So it's not that the constitution changed. No, the interpretation of constitution changed. So what is beautiful about law, and why we are in a way, we use technology as force multiplier, but artificial intelligence cannot replace us, is also because we are social engineers. Lawyers are really like social engineers. We have to engineer as the life goes on. If life goes on virtual world, then lawyers have to keep pace. If law goes on if Elon Musk takes us to the Mars, then laws will catch up, trust me.
That's right.
That was very well said, ma'am. So, dear viewers, this was Ms. Aishwarya Bhati, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, sharing her views on various aspects of law. We thank her to take out her valuable time to be here with us. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I enjoyed this a lot.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
So did we, ma'am.
So did we, yeah. That was a wonderful session.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was nice to have a sense of what all you feel, what are your thoughts. In fact, I would have loved to have your comments on the answers also. That would have given me a better perspective.
Yeah. Actually,
Well, the artificial intelligence
short
was
on
pretty
time.
good.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Especially the last question, I really
The
loved that.
artificial intelligence, what you just said about.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, ma'am, the answers which were given, I never thought from this particular perspective that, when I talk about my privacy, so obviously my privacy has some, limitations that beyond that I can't stretch. For example, the COVID-19, because we were actually making a big hue and cry about that, the application, taking our information. But now I believe that actually, it is beneficial for the community good. So.
Yeah, Arogya Setu has raised a lot of questions. You're right, it is, and we've seen hackers hack into it. But it is not like an Aadhaar card which is going to go on with you through life. Let this period pass and we can all delete it. The point is, if you and I may be responsible, but if for masses, if everybody has it, imagine the kind of efforts that the contract tracing team has been doing. For one positive patient, in the initial times, we had a train of volunteers doing the contact tracing. And with the Arogya Setu app, that becomes easy.
Right. I mean, just a very
Ma'am,
hard
I
times
think
in which
now, ma'am, I think now they're not gonna be skeptical about lawyers anyway in near future.
that is for sure.
Yes.
That's true.
I'll be happy to join you for any other interaction, online, offline, whether you record it, no, don't
Definitely,
record
ma'am.
it.
For sure,
It'll
ma'am.
be nice to have
For
the
sure,
views
ma'am.
of
For sure.
the next generation of our country. I feel energized when, and I love this more because it was more interactive.